He said, "Schmuck, what do you mean? You're facing 23 years in federal prison." The federal government said I placed $21 million of bets over a 6-year span. The only time I could laugh is if I was smoking marijuana or doing cocaine. I mean, the first time I placed bets was the first time I got out of control, to be honest. Alanis is wondering what happened with this $4.6 million you stole. I embezzled $7 million, which was my net losses. I said, okay, so what does this exactly mean? He said, well, you're facing 23 years in federal prison. Not gambling means freedom. And that I never had until this.
Jonathan Schwartz operated as a business manager in Hollywood, working with high-profile clients such as Beyonce, Alanis Morissette, and Linkin Park. He suffered from a gambling addiction and also drug addiction that spanned 6 years, during which time he embezzled $7 million from his clients. His double life collapsed and he was sent to prison. Today, he's joined me to share his story as a cautionary tale, but most importantly, as a story of hope. Jonathan, welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it.
I worked very hard on that, even though I did fluff it up anyway. No, it's great to have you on, mate. Thank you so much for coming on. Tell us about your childhood and early influences and what made you go into accounting, into business management.
Sure. I grew up in a lovely place, very famous at the time I grew up. It's called the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York. My father left myself when I was 4, my younger brother, and my mom to actually left her as a single parent to support 2 children and herself. And that was really hard for her. She took out a lot of stress on me, which today I can historically have considered a childhood trauma. But today I've worked on the suppressed trauma that I kept in for 46 years. But I have a lot of respect for my mom today. She was forced to take 3 jobs, put food on the table, a roof over our head, and clothes on us. And she had so many responsibilities that she wasn't expecting as a result of the abrupt departure of my father. May he rest in peace. He died in 2017. He too was a gambling addict, a cocaine addict, and I never thought growing up that I would want to be like him, but to some degree, I became much worse than him. Given my maladaptive choices, I kind of always knew that I wanted to be an accountant. Frankly, in high school and college, that was probably the only subject, one, that interested me, and two, that I was, like, it resonated with me, so it became almost natural. So, interestingly enough, the second of 3 colleges I went to was in SUNY Albany, State University of New York Albany. They had a great accounting program. And I had this idea, I call it a genius idea, but I put quotes around it because it wasn't a very brilliant idea. But I'm going to name it a genius idea just for purposes of this conversation. I asked one of my fraternity brothers, I said, hey, why don't we become bookies, sports bookies for the Greek system at school? So he's like, okay, let's do it. So rather than do it the right way and make sure that we equalized sort of each side of the bet, if you will. Let's say it was a football game. I'm making this up, Giants versus the Dolphins. You don't want to be heavily weighted on one team because then you're rooting for the team rather than as a bookie not caring who wins. So we didn't do that. We were not very bright. And as a result, we lost over 2 weeks. I always say we were the only bookies on this planet that lost. Um, so uh, unfortunately, we lost $10,000, which half of that was my responsibility, of which I could not afford to pay. So I chose to leave school, and that was like the first sign of me abandoning people whom I hurt, particularly the fraternity brother who was left to pay that debt. I then moved to San Francisco where my mother was living, finished up my college education at San Francisco State, where I earned a bachelor's degree in accounting.
Talk me through the moment you feel was your first big break. You don't have to mention the client, but the first time you were sort of, right, I've made it here. I've got this person now. This is becoming hugely successful.
The reason I don't have a problem mentioning the clients because it's coming from a place of humility, but I won't disclose the 4 other clients aside from the one, Alanis, who went public with this, who was a direct victim as well. I want to honor the four other clients in addition to Alana's request to keep their names sealed in the courtroom, and I continue to honor that. But the first real client that I had this my career, what I'll call my career crossroad, my career breakthrough was in 2000 when an incredibly young band named Linkin Park was looking for business management, and they contacted my partner Michael. May he rest in peace. He was my favorite partner, although I respected all my partners who gave me an opportunity to work with them. Unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago. I wasn't able to go to his funeral. I likely wouldn't have been welcome to, but I was still on probation years ago. And I wasn't allowed to communicate with my former partners, former employees, or even the direct victims or indirect victims. But Lincoln Park came out with Hybrid Theory in November of 2000, and they retained my firm's services, and I became the lead partner eventually. Incredible bands. I have most respect for them. They were not a victim of my crime. They were like my family, as all clients were. They came to my son's bar mitzvahs. I bought Chester's car. May he rest in peace as well. The lead singer at that time passed away from suicide. Lovely man, and I bought my middle son a car from him. Just we all had good relationships with one another, and I respected Lincoln Park the most because they had such high expectations as to how the scope of responsibilities they put on me as their business manager. With those high expectations, it helped me become a better business manager. Again, this is pre-addiction, so I could say I was a good business manager pre-addiction, certainly not in active addiction. But that was my career. I would start getting calls. My assistant would start getting calls from attorneys, entertainment attorneys, personal managers, agents. They see the success that Lincoln's having. Well, uh, I cannot take credit for their success at all. I did what they hired me to do as their professional, but their success is owned all by themselves. They're creative geniuses. They took their business of making music, writing songs, and all the other things that they did, merchandise, etc., to a degree that was never seen in the industry before. It was, I'll never forget the first time I went on their tour bus to say hello. I was thinking I was going into a bus and it was about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, these guys, six guys who are nerds playing video games, and I'm like a little disappointed. I thought I'd see a little something sexier. But at the end of the day, they're incredible men. They're super bright outside of music. They have beautiful families. And I wanted to work hard for them because they deserve that, and that's what they asked of me. And I miss them today. I certainly miss Chester a lot. And the other guys I have a lot of respect for. They started with a new lead singer named Emily. I try not to watch too much of the entertainment world today, but I will say that I love their new music. That's no disrespect to Chester, who's irreplaceable, but they've moved on successfully with this new lead singer, and I applaud Mike Shinoda and the other band members for coming back onto the scene and making a solid impact with their music and helping millions of people. Um, that are fans of theirs today. That was my lucky break, and from there I just got some incredible clients. I represented Gwen Paltrow, Mariah Carey, Beyonce, and Chance the Rapper, and so many more. But I never got enamored by the clients and who they were, and I think that's why I was able to earn the opportunity to work with them because they knew that I wasn't a yes business manager. They knew if they were asking me if they could spend money on this or so on and so forth, that I would say no if they couldn't afford it, or I'd say yes, but X, Y, and Z. And so I was blessed to have these amazing clients. And like I said earlier, those that were direct victims didn't deserve it, and those that weren't direct victims didn't deserve the embarrassment that I put out there to the industry and to the world once my case became public. I mean, they didn't deserve that either. And I hope one day I can make amends to them. You only make amends to those that it's likely not to cause harm to them. And I think reliving this for Alanis or some of the other victims could cause them emotional harm. And I don't want to put them through that. I already did enough to harm them. But as a result of embezzling what I did and other poor choices, it hurt a lot of people. It hurt my partners. It hurt my staff of 75 employees. It hurt the entertainment. It rocked the entertainment world. It hurt them dearly. I hurt my mom, who's battling stage 4 lung cancer still to this day. Thank God she's still alive. I hurt my kids, my three beautiful sons. I hurt the community I lived in. I mean, the list goes on and on with how my poor choices, the ripple effect of the people that I hurt. Again, I can't live in self-pity and I can't live in my past and I can't, and I choose to forgive myself. And because forgiveness allows me to maintain a sustainable recovery and allows me to keep my head up high and allows me to just become a better human being each day. And that's my goal.
Love the forgiveness bit. I personally am a believer of forgive, but don't forget. So you said you don't live in your past. So I use my past to remind myself if I go back out there, that's what's waiting for me. I'm going to have the exact same outcome as the previous 200 times that I did it, that I went to gambling. But we can't live there in the past. If we sit there thinking about all the terrible things we did, all the people we hurt, if we're sitting there thinking about that all day, we're going to be depressed, we're going to be down. And that is another danger, that I could go out gambling because I want to escape that feeling. Talk me through the build up to where your client said, do you want to place a bet? And you said you were unable to say no. You've gone straight in. Talk me through how it's gone from that, not being able to say no and placing that first bet, to the first time you lost control, first time your bets got out of control.
I mean, the first time I placed bets was the first time I got out of control, to be honest. When this assistant coach asked me if I want to place a bet, and I said yes. And, I thought it would be like whether it started out at $50 or a little higher. I mean, I was already making seven figures a year at that point in my career. $50 was $50. It didn't mean much, but then it became progressively worse every bet, every day, until I was betting hundreds of thousands of dollars a week. And I know we don't like to talk about money in Gamblers Anonymous when we're sharing it. That's not my intention here, but it's just to give you and your viewers kind of like a baseline of what kind of degenerate I once was. I mean, literally, the federal government said I placed $21 million of bets over a 6-year span, which netted $7 million in losses. That first week where I lost maybe $25,000, I should have just paid it myself. And instead, I decided to quote unquote borrow it, which in real translation means steal. And then I'm chasing now. From week two was the start. Week two of almost a 6-year run was the start of me simply chasing to repay back this first client. And when that was over, the first client, going to the second client and the third client, so it was maybe the fifth client. And I didn't realize how much I had embezzled. I never paid attention to it. I ignored it through my deniability and kept telling lies to everybody. No one suspected it. No one knew about the gambling or the cocaine, not a single soul. So for 6 years, I could not sleep a single night. If I heard a siren, I would be scared they're coming to get me. I knew inevitably I was going to be caught, but I didn't want to bring anyone into it. I didn't want to bring my wife at the time into it. I didn't want to bring my partners into it. I just kept lying and lying every week and pretending I was someone I wasn't. And had to pretend when I walked in the office or attended a client meeting that life is so hunky dory and I'm doing great when deep down inside I'm miserable. I remember when I first went to the rooms of Gamblers Anonymous on May 9th, 2016, which is my sober date for with both gambling and cocaine, and I cried every night I went there. I cried. During, at that point, I was living in fear of what my sentencing was going to be.
As you're calling up the bank to embezzle the money to get that next bet, talk me through that process of I imagine the fear as you're making that call, but then the relief once they approve it and you've got that money to place that bet. Like, I'm linking it to part of my gambling. Talk me through that process.
Yeah, so when Sunday night I realized that the last game, the Sunday night evening NFL game is over, I'm sitting in my sports room at my house where my kids are, and I'm putting on this facade to them that dad's happy, whatever, when dad just lost X number of dollars and is miserable inside. And then going to bed, I couldn't sleep, as I mentioned earlier, particularly on Sunday nights, because I'm concocting some scenario. What am I going to present to the bank? Why this client needs cash delivered to me so that I can meet my bookie on Tuesday in the office building garage and pay him. I just don't know how I created so many lies for so many years. It was disgusting. And that night, the next morning on Monday, I would procrastinate before calling the bank, because procrastination for me was, again, one of my million defects of character. And then I finally called them up and I just made up a story. And thankfully, the private banker for the clients believed me because nobody suspected at this time that I was gambling or using cocaine. And so, yeah, the bank would have a carrier deliver the money, and I'd pay the bookie and continue to gamble every day. I didn't even know the word stop. I didn't even know help. I didn't know those words, And so, and a lot of that was dictated by my ego in active addiction, you know. I certainly can acknowledge that I had an ego then, and to some degree, I have a healthy version of an ego today, but it's certainly well below humility, right? Above all the isms and above ego for me today. Those were tough. The early part of the week was tough, coming up with lies, and then the rest of the week was even tougher because I continued to lose. I'm out of control, and I'm like the king of self-sabotage. I had to bet every game on the college football. I had to bet every game on the NFL, and I couldn't just bet this against the spread or with the spread. I had to bet over-unders. I had to bet parlays and teasers. And on every game, there's no probable way with math or otherwise that you can win. And so uh, I didn't win, clearly. I embezzled $7 million, which was my net losses over a 6-year period. And as a result, thankfully, I got caught, and thankfully the clients were reimbursed and paid back in full. I was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison in May of 2017 for one count of wire fraud and one count of bank fraud. I'm sorry, wire fraud and tax fraud. So I served my time. I re-entered society. As a felon, it was really difficult for me to get a job. I took a job working at Dunkin' Donuts. I got fired after 2, 3 months because I wasn't cleaning the floors or the countertops well. And I took another job, and ultimately that job was interesting. It was an auto salesperson at a Lexus dealership in Thousand Oaks, California. And I had a 3 to 4 month provisional license because under California rule, in order to be an auto salesperson, the Department of Motor Vehicles needs to issue you a license to do that. And so they gave me a 3 to 4 month provisional license. And then during month 3, we received notification that my provisional license was now null and void and that I couldn't operate or work as an auto salesperson. So I took it to an administrative judge who said, Jonathan, you've submitted so many rehabilitation letters about yourself. I'm willing to allow you to work there. I'll never forget this, and no disrespect to auto salespeople that might be listening, but the Department of Motor Vehicles had their attorney present, and he said, no, Your Honor, we cannot accept him as an auto salesperson because auto sales people is the #1 profession made up of people with integrity. And I wanted to vomit then, but that would have been really unprofessional. And the old Jonathan in active addiction would have responded very impulsively and in defense. And this Jonathan, the Jonathan that I was when I was presenting myself, I just surrendered to my higher power and I said, I accept that those continue to be the consequences of my poor choices of the past. And that was also a sign from my higher power, who I have a strong connection with, saying, hey, I want you to go to addiction studies school, get your KDAC, become a certified addiction drug counselor. I also want you to go to grad school and become a marriage family therapist with an emphasis in addiction and trauma. And I did both. Um, so there was a reason for being fired from Dunkin' Donuts. There was a reason for that attorney not allowing me to continue my profession as an auto salesperson. And today I am. I'm both. I work in a substance use treatment center, dual diagnosis, substance use primary, mental health secondary. And every day I'm giving therapy, and I'm also a program director, and it's the best. I make very little money today, but I'm the happiest I've ever been. It's all about progress, not perfection. And to be able to walk into that room today and with my head up high and not live in my past, but not forget my past, keeps me humbled and keeps me embracing this program. I still face challenges every day as a result of my past and the mistakes that I made, but I don't sit and play the victim role. I don't sit and say, woo me. There were times where I did, but that's why, again, I say I'm not perfect. Today, I practice humility and I practice doing the next right thing as best as I can on a daily basis.
Jonathan, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I agreed and related to almost all of it. And just, I love progress, not perfection. I always say that myself. Perfection doesn't exist. I was striving for it for 20, 30 years. It took me that long to realize it doesn't exist. Progress, not perfection. I love it. I've written down a couple of things. I just want to take you way back. I know when I was in high school, I wanted to be a wrestler. I wanted to be a Formula One driver. I wanted to work for the WWE. Normally, kids want to be astronauts, want to go off into space. Thank you for admitting you wanted to be an accountant. Very unusual thing as a high schooler, but thank you for admitting to that to begin with. When you became the bookie in college, you said you just straight in. It wasn't a level. You weren't being a level bookie. You were basically gambling, but on the other side of the fence. Was that your first experience with gambling, or did you have some previous experience?
No, I didn't have any gambling experience other than my father being the degenerate he was in terms of gambling. No, it was again, it was just the idea like, how am I gonna, my mom was still poor. My father was non-existent in my life, and I had no real guidance. And so that instability I talked about earlier growing up carried with me all the way to 46 years. I had never dealt with my childhood trauma until 46. I'll be 56 in December of this year. And I didn't have the courage to ask for help. I was insecure, but I presented myself to the outer world, certainly as a business manager, that I was, had high level of confidence and I was successful, but I really wasn't successful when I looked at myself in the mirror. Again, people thought I was successful, defined by those clients I talked about, but when you're miserable and you don't will deal with your past childhood experiences and you don't have the courage to ask for help, you're going to end up like me, making really poor choices, hurting myself through self-sabotaging. Eventually, I became addicted to cocaine, and that was really a difficult period toward the tail end of my gambling. And as you probably know, gambling and suicidal ideation is the biggest correlation amongst addiction with suicidality. Thankfully, I could identify my kids, my mom, my stepfather, as reasons to live, because I certainly couldn't at that point identify myself because I was so angry every day for 6 years at myself while I was gambling. Like, how could I violate my fiduciary responsibility to clients who I absolutely respected? And I say this often because when people hear me say this, they're like, who are you kidding? You respected them, but yet you stole from them? The answer is yes. Yeah, and whether that you want to say that's the mindset of a gambler, possibly, that was just my mindset, and I stand by that with great conviction. That none of the clients that I embezzled from, that the handful of them, deserved any of this. That I can accept, and I can take personal accountability for those poor choices. I am glad that they all got paid back in full. It again doesn't mean what I did was right because it was certainly wrong. And so today I sit here in front of you on your podcast, and I, as a compulsive gambler, uh, I say I wish I would have asked for help, but I didn't have the courage. So a long answer to your question, it was my first time gambling in college.
I love the asking for help is strength, not weakness. Same as yourself, I struggled with that for years. No, just I can do it myself. I'm not weak. I don't need help. It's the complete opposite. Asking for help, getting up the courage to ask for that help initially is the biggest hurdle to overcome. And I love that.
And today, I think also crying is beautiful. I mean, I still cry today, not every day, but I could cry. And I think it's really cool, to be honest. I think it's beautiful for men and women. But speaking as a man, I think crying is a way that I connect with my emotions because I couldn't connect with my emotions when going through my childhood trauma or even going through the active addiction years. But today, I have a strong relationship with my mind and body.
Can't wait to talk about all the work that you're doing today because I'm just relating to so many terms and so much self reflection that you're talking about that I talk about with my psychotherapist. I can't wait to dive into that because I'm loving even just the crying. I'm while I was in addiction, I just numb to my emotions the entire time. And now I'm a crier. I think having a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old daughter is linked to that as well. I'm a big softie now, but yeah, I love crying now. There's no shame in it for me anymore. Whereas in addiction, it was that big macho. No, I'm not a crier. I wasn't in touch with my emotions the entire time.
Someone asked me the other day, new young person that asked me to sponsor him in Gamblers Anonymous. He said, "How do you ever forget, like, those years of your life that you wasted?" I don't need to remember those years, and the reason is I'm reminded of the past, my wreckage of my past on it every day. And I try not to use absolutes, but I can honestly say every day I'm reminded by a challenge, whether it's a financial challenge that I can't afford to pay a bill, or whether it's that I don't have the relationship I want with two of my three kids today. I have adult three sons. My younger son and I talk multiple times a day. My middle son is still not ready to talk with me. It's almost 10 years now. And my older son, I talk to maybe 4 times a year. Uh, I'm not complaining because I'm blessed that I get to talk to my older son 4 times a year. My dream is one day all three of my kids will come back in my life at the same time. It's not on my timeline, but my higher power, I truly believe, will bring back two of my three older sons because I'm already have the third one with me when he feels the time is right. And I believe that. And the only way that I can earn back that trust of rupturing my family is through my daily actions, not the words that come out of my mouth. I don't expect my kids to believe, or anyone, frankly, who wants to earn back my trust, or is willing to allow me, excuse me, to earn back their trust, through what I say out of this mouth. Because to them, this mouth was one of dishonesty and manipulation. While I know that that's not the case today, I get to, as they say in the program, earn that back if given the chance through my daily actions, not my words. And that's why my days today, for the most part, my behaviors and thoughts are congruent with pro recovery behavior. I hope they'll come back in my life. This weekend, for example, I was supposed to be in Chicago at a cousin's wedding, and I couldn't afford to go, but my kids are all there. I wish I was there. But maybe my higher power didn't want me to be there because the kids maybe would feel uncomfortable with me around them. And that's okay for today. So I don't live in that self-pity like I talked about earlier, but I am reminded from time to time of the ripple effect of my poor choices that really permeates throughout not just financial, but emotional challenges that I face. Because as you know, and they say in our combo book of Gamblers Anonymous, gambling is not a financial problem, it's an emotional problem. I could talk forever, and I'm sorry I'm rambling, but I just enjoy your podcast, and especially because it's about gambling, which for me was I call it DOC, but gambling is not a substance use, it's a behavioral addiction. But I can watch a game today, like I could watch sports today. I don't have urges to gamble, but I don't really watch it the way I used to watch it. For example, a football game, I'd have to watch every play from the first kickoff to the end of the game, and I wouldn't take a break unless it was halftime. And then even if it was halftime, maybe there's another game that's not yet at halftime, so I got to watch that game too. So my life was miserable. Those 6 years were the most miserable years of my life, and today I've turned it around through my resilience, through the support of my sober peers and Gamblers Anonymous, through the support of my current employer and staff, and the clients that come in and still stay in touch with us when they leave and discharge from treatment, and through my sponsees. And through my sponsor, and through my mom. And there's so many people that I can say the quality of people that I've chosen to surround myself around today is a gift that I've given myself because I couldn't do this journey alone, this recovery journey.
Please don't apologize, Jonathan. If you're rambling, you're not gambling. I love that saying. I can relate to my love of sports is football, soccer for the American and Aussies out there. And I can now watch, and it's a completely different watch. Like, I'll still get frustrated specifically at my team, Everton, when we more than likely don't win. But I love that it can still impact my mood for the following couple of hours, but it's not to the detriment of what gambling used to do, the losses, the mental toll that it used to take on me. I completely relate to it. I've gotten that love back for my sport now, and I can watch it and enjoy it. Even if my team don't win, it doesn't affect me as badly as it used to. I am sorry to hear about the relationship with your sons. It's not quite where you want it to be, but I love the power of your serenity prayer, how you've just grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot control. You're there, your door is open, your arms are wide open, waiting for, hopefully sooner rather than later, your sons to come back to you, and you're ready to repair that relationship again. I love the strength that you're showing there, because I can see how much it cuts you up, that the relationship isn't where you want it to be. But like you've said, that's okay for today.
Absolutely.
Sincerely hope they come around sooner rather than later for you, Jonathan. I can see how much of a genuine guy you are, and how much of a family man you are, how proud you are of those three lads that you've got.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I want you to talk me through it. Now, I completely related to this. Anyone watching, I want them to know just how lonely this is. You said nobody knew about what you were doing. The mental toll that must have took. Just talk me through how lonely and how isolating it is while you're living that double life. The mental toll that it takes on you of living that double life, of not reaching out, of not asking for help, of not talking to somebody. Tell me all about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's evidence-based literature that supports, first of all, multi-generational transmission. So my father, as I said, being a gambling and cocaine addict, that's like the disease component that was passed down to me. But when I say disease, I use that not as an excuse, but as a contributing factor. Um, I own all the wrongs that I've done. But there became a choice, right? And that choice was me placing that first bet and taking money from a client. So I believe this global question of whether addiction is a disease versus a choice, I believe it's a hybrid. And so for me, once I started to make that poor choice, it just kept going and going and going for those 6 years. I never wanted to tell my wife because I thought I could win it back. And then when I got into it, and if I had told her, I knew inevitably I was going to get caught. I wish I could have surrendered to the law enforcement sooner, and gotten caught sooner. But again, probably a little bit of ego prevented me from doing that. Probably my inability to ask for help certainly contributed. And I didn't want to embarrass, my wife or my partners. It was literally so hard to fall asleep. I had to take sleeping aids, whether it was Ambien or something else to help me fall asleep, because once my wife would fell asleep, it was time for me to just stay up in my head and figure out what am I going to say to the bank the next day. Not a good way to live. It likely contributed to a lot of my chronic illness today. Like I've had neck fusion since I've been, before I went away and back. I had a back fusion. I have heart disease. These things were likely not transmitted from my father, but rather a result of childhood experiences and also the active addiction years of putting that kind of stress on my mind and body. So for those that are listening out there, I can assure you that to please ask for help, one, because you're worth it, and two, the consequences are severe, not just rupturing your family dynamics, rupturing your own health and wellness, and not being productive at work, not living a life where you can smile. I couldn't laugh for 6 years. You couldn't make me laugh. The only time I could laugh is if I was smoking marijuana or doing cocaine because I was under the influence of the chemical or chemicals. I could not laugh at all. Today, I can watch something and laugh. And when I do that, I need internal validation. I don't seek external validation anymore because I'm no longer a people pleaser. For example, on your beautiful YouTube, right? Like maybe half the people will dislike things. Maybe will say I'm not a nice person. That's okay. They're entitled to that. When I put myself out there like that, people are entitled to their opinion, and I respect it regardless of what they say. But that's not going to drive me bananas. And the people that enjoy it, I'm glad that I can help them perhaps not make the same mistakes that I made. Right now, I'm a volunteer for Gamblers Anonymous hotline. I can't tell you how many calls I get a day, people asking for help. I applaud them the moment they say I need help. I give them the meeting directory of wherever they are and how to find the meeting. You can't give therapy, even as a therapist, to a hotline. So I just give them words of encouragement as a gambler and let them know that I'm here with them as their brother, just like they'll eventually, if they go to meetings and start taking these programs seriously, they'll be of service to others when they finish the steps. So, for me, that's the way I live my life today. I choose to live it that way. I got to work on myself every day. If I become complacent in my personal recovery plan, then I'm just as susceptible to relapsing for gambling, cocaine, or anything as anyone else with one day of sobriety. So while I have long-term sobriety today, I choose not to be complacent because I fear complacency. Oh, and that's why I take this program so seriously. Working in treatment is great, but that's not my program. My program is going to meetings, being a sponsor, and helping people.
I love the service, the volunteering for the Gamblers Anonymous hotline. Just amazing service that you're giving back, Jonathan. Thank you for that, for the amazing work that you're doing to help others. I always say the cycle of addiction was just negativity on top of negativity, and it's just you're stuck in this cycle. Recovery is all about positivity, and it's just a cycle of positivity. And you've just said it there. Hopefully, you can help somebody, and then that them in turn can help somebody else further down the line. And it just hopefully it snowballs into a cycle of recovery instead of addiction. I'm a massive people pleaser myself as well. I've done a lot of work on that. I'm still doing a lot of work on that and seeking that external validation. Now say it doesn't always come, it doesn't always happen, but I say how I feel about myself when I'm by myself is the most important thing. Like I still struggle in many areas of that, but the self-awareness that I have about knowing that can lead to a relapse, not getting complacent, trying to take one step forward. And if I take a step back today, that's okay. As long as I try and take a step forward the next day, then that's my program. That's me working my recovery, trying to fix those character defects and those weaknesses that could lead me back to a relapse, lead me back to gambling. You said a couple of times it was inevitable. You were going to get caught. Tell me the story of that moment, the build up to that moment and what it felt like.
So, as I mentioned earlier, when I heard sirens, I just thought they were coming to get me. And then one day, I think it was end of 2015, early 2016, I was in Tampa Bay with helping Beyonce with her rehearsals for the launch of her Lemonade tour. And I received a phone call from one of my partners at the time. And he said, Alanis is wondering what happened with this $4.6 million you stole. I said, in that moment, I figured, okay, let me just come up with another lie because I'm still in deniability. So I said to my partner, listen, I'll come back and I'll show you that she signed off on all that money. She did not sign off on a single dollar being taken from her. But I thought again that I was Superman, that I can go back to LA, which I did. I told Beyonce I have to go for personal reasons. And I went, flew back, I met with my partners and their attorneys, and I was playing poker with them. I said, listen, not only will I get you her signature, but why don't you guys just give me a lie detector test? Like, and I didn't think the idea of playing poker was I was going to say that with confidence, and they weren't hopefully going to accept that invitation that I gave them. Well, about a week or two later, celebrating my 23-year anniversary with my ex-wife in Santa Barbara, now my ex-wife in Santa Barbara, and I get a call from one of my partners, and he said, we need you to come down to Beverly Hills, which is about an hour and a half from Santa Barbara, and take a lie detector test with a retired FBI agent polygrapher. And so in this hotel room, my ex-wife my wife at the time didn't know, but I would be snorting lines of cocaine and gambling. And I said, I have to go tomorrow. And Beverly Hills, you enjoy yourself, and I'll come back and we'll have a nice dinner together. Well, what happened was that was May 8th, 2016. Because as I said earlier, May 9th, 2016 is my sober date. And so on May 8th, I'm driving down there, bringing all the cocaine I can bring to the lie detector test, making my last bet with my bookie. I get to the polygrapher's office. I put my feet up on his table. I think I'm a big shot. I think, by the way, I Googled the night before, how to beat a lie detector test. And so I'm there and I'm thinking, wow, we've just been talking for 2 hours. I'm shaking from the cocaine. There's no way I'm going to pass this test, but I think I'll beat him. That's my mentality. I'll beat him. So we're establishing this beautiful rapport, and I'm thinking I'm the one establishing the rapport. But the part about the Googling was I didn't read that it's his responsibility as a polygrapher to build a rapport with me to make me feel comfortable that when he puts on the device, I'm going to be ready and feel cool, calm, and collected. Well, I wasn't cool, calm, and collected because of what was in my body. And I left the test and I called my wife and I said, I'm coming back. Let's enjoy dinner. I'll see you in an hour and a half, couple hours. When I get back to the hotel room, I try to log into my laptop to the firm and I was denied access. So I'm like, that's this surreal moment where likely I'm caught. And so I called my attorney and he said, Jonathan, you failed the test worse than anybody in that FBI agent polygrapher's career. I said, okay, so what does this exactly mean? He said, well, you're facing 23 years in federal prison. So what do you think it means? It means you need to come see me the next day, tomorrow, and we need to come up with a strategy. In that moment, you can imagine how scared I was. Now I'm never going to see my family. 23 years seems like an eternity. And I went to see him, and he worked out a plea agreement for 4 to 6 years with the prosecution. And on May 3rd, 2017, about 14 months later, I was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. And that's a lot better than 23, but I was hoping for a lot less than six. But you know what? As the judge said, and today I respect that. I didn't respect that in the moment, but what the judge said is, given the audaciousness of your crime, I could deviate from the 4 to 6 year plea agreement, but I'm going to give you the 6 years. And I'll never forget that. 2 months later, I surrendered on July 11th of 2017 to federal prison camp in Sheridan, Oregon, where I completed a residential drug and alcohol program, which took a year off my sentence. And after I completed that, I asked to be transferred to a federal prison in California, so maybe my family can come visit me. And that prison closed down early due to COVID. And so I was one of two inmates that was let out early the day before they officially closed the prison. And I was put on 16 months of home confinement with an ankle monitor, and I served 3 years of probation. Yeah, I paid my dues, if you will, but my dues would mean nothing in terms of my time spent under the government watch. What really means the most is staying part of this PA program. That's what saves my life every day. Not that I have suicidal ideation, I certainly don't. I can identify a million reasons to live. And part of them, aside from my kids and my mother, my girlfriend today, and my stepfather, it's myself. I'm happy where I am in my life today, and it's all because of this program.
What was that 14 months like between being found out and being sentenced? I imagine the uncertainty of that whole period must have been really scary.
It was because like you said, living in the unknown for an addict is not healthy. So I'm living in the unknown. I'm catastrophizing. I'm future tripping. I'm going to get 23 years. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get that. And at that point, my wife and I were separated during those 14 months. I was one day awakened, I should say, by the U.S. Marshals who came knocking on this rental house I was at. I opened the door. They put me in handcuffs and they took me to the federal building in downtown Los Angeles. And I keep asking them, why are you doing this? Why are you taking me? Like, I don't get it. Well, they can't talk to you, but they had guns ablazing. It was an embarrassment in my neighborhood, another consequence of my poor choice. And thankfully, my attorney showed up and the judge just issued a additional bond rather than having me stay at Los Angeles Federal Detention Center and probably would have stayed there for a very long time before being transported to prison. So I was grateful for that. It was not a pleasant experience, those 14 months, especially after the U.S. Marshals came. But again, I have the ability today to look back at anything and say, and not blame anybody, because the truth is, if I were to blame someone for doing something as a result of what I've done, how's that pro recovery? And that's something that's really helped me become a better human being as well, is just recognizing that, again, these poor choices are going to creep up, and they do often. And when they do, who am I to be mad at someone who's reacting to those poor choices? Because again, absent my poor choices, this person wouldn't be reacting the way they are. And that's how I like to look at things today for my own growth.
Taking accountability for your actions, that's a massive part of my
100%.
recovery. No blame. Nobody else created my addiction. There's things that started my addiction, but it was me. It was my account. Like, it's a fine line. There's no blame, but it was my actions that did that. I now have to put this work into my recovery to ensure I don't go back there. And a way I help let go of the money that's gone. I now consider myself the best version of myself I've ever been right now and here today. All of that money, all of those losses, it was an investment in me becoming the person that I am. Because I was addicted from the age of 16, so I never grew up. I never matured without the addiction, and I've done all that these last 4 years since coming into recovery.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it. I could have went to prison for some of the things I did in my addiction. I usually say luckily, but it may have helped me stop earlier if I did. But I was never caught. I was never found out. In the Gamblers Anonymous book, it says 3 outcomes: prison, insanity, or death. Prison scares the life out of me. Tell me what that was like. What happened on the inside?
Yeah, I love when they read that every group, every meeting, prison, insanity, death, because all 3 of them I confronted or experienced. Prison, you talk about crying. When I first entered prison and I'm walking down to the camp from the cell that they hold, it's called like the holding place while they do all the paperwork. They give you these orange Crocs. So I'm walking down, which means all the inmates, and there's about 400, know that when I'm walking down into the camp, that I'm new. So it was a little frightful, but I happened to get lucky, and there was a gentleman waiting for me that knew I was coming there. We both retained the same prison consultant because I wanted to know what prison was going to be like. Was I going to get raped, like you watching the movies? Like what's going to happen to me? And so he really helped me, and he helped my younger son feel more comfortable as well. But I knew this guy would eventually be waiting for me. I wouldn't have recognized him, but because he saw those orange Crocs, he knew who I was, and he took me under his wings. And for the first 6 months there, I was crying every day like a little baby. And you don't cry in prison. And so he finally came up to me and he said, "You got to stop crying, dude. You got to stop counting 72 months each day at a time. You're going to drive yourself bananas." And he was right. And I stopped crying and I started to accept that I'm going to be here for a long time. And instead of counting the days, I counted the Super Bowls. And that's how I got through each year, one after the other. I'm grateful because he is one of my great friends today. I have a handful of guys that I talk to still today from my prison years. They're great people. You know, when you take time to get to know an individual and not judge them by the book by their cover, if you will, I realized that even gangbangers were great people. They have family members who they love. They made poor choices. Who am I to judge someone who makes poor choices when I made serious poor choices? So I really got along. I didn't get any fights. I got along well with most inmates. I ran a victim impact program that the COs assigned me to run, which I was grateful for that. I was able to sit once a week with about 9 inmates, and it rotates every couple weeks, helping them identify the victims of their crime. So for white collar guys, it was pretty easy for many of them to say, okay, I can hold myself accountable. I can recognize my victims, and I need to apologize to those victims. The drug guys would say, wait a second, Jonathan, you're asking me to identify victims. I don't have any victims. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have any victims? How do you know that the person you or persons you sold drugs to, one, didn't die of an overdose, or two, become addicted to the drug you sold them, or three, how much you hurt, how much that person that you sold drugs to, his family dynamics is now ruptured because that person is using your drug. Ultimately, they adopted that suggestion. They were able to identify victims, and hearing them on the phone talking to their loved ones pre the victim impact group and post was night and day. Pre, they're cursing at their baby mama or their wife or whomever, for all the wrong reasons. And post, they're saying, "I love you. Thank you for watching our children while I'm here. I'm sorry for what I did." That was the first example of really being of service and continuing that, as I've mentioned before, from the day I got home. But prison wasn't easy, but it also wasn't, I needed it. I deserved it. Did I deserve 6 years? That wasn't up for me to determine, and I respect that that's what the judge ultimately concluded. Whether they would have been different or not, I'm grateful for what my life has in front of it today.
The growth that I'm listening to, just not only while you're in prison, but just before the sentencing, it's just amazing that your last bet date was that day of the lie detector test. How across that 14 months of uncertainty, across the prison time, you'd be very susceptible to going back to your addiction, to wanting to escape. But just hearing all the amazing work that you've done is incredible, the resilience that you've shown to beat the addiction and do all that work simultaneously. Tell me what your recovery looked like in those early days and what it looks like today.
So it's funny, it's a good question because in the 14 months, I decided that I was going to go to a gambling and drug treatment center outpatient program. And I did. I went to a place called Bet Teshuva in Venice, California. And I went there about 4 days a week for their IOP, therapy in groups. But I honestly can say I didn't go there for the right reason. I went there because they had an alternative sentencing department. And I thought once I went in front of the judge, the alternative sentencing department would give me a nice letter that I was compliant and I attended and this and that. But the truth is, again, I wasn't there to get better. I was there to receive that letter and hope it would help reduce my sentence in court, which it didn't. And that's okay. I did start my step work before going to prison. I finished most of the steps and completed the rest in prison. The first step was the step that I had a big challenge with because I still had an ego. And I went to my sponsor and I said, I don't understand step one instructions. That's during these 14 months. I don't understand step one instructions. You're telling me that I'm powerless and unmanageable? And I don't understand where I'm powerless and unmanageable. He said, Schmuck, what do you mean? You're facing 23 years in federal prison. You don't think your life's unmanageable and you're powerless? I said, you're right. Let's get started on these steps right now. And that's like that moment where I started to develop a little humility, because I certainly didn't have it then. And that guy saved my life, my sponsor. I have the utmost respect for him still to this day.
The transition from the role, you transitioning into the role of addiction counselor, therapist, how fulfilling is that work now? And talk me through that work.
Amazing. It's incredibly rewarding. It's also emotionally exhausting. But, as a therapist, the beautiful part about my job as a therapist is that therapists are not recommended to self-disclose. But self-disclosure is limited to if you believe it could help the client. And because I specialize in addiction and trauma and I work in a substance use treatment center, I choose to self-disclose because when I tell them that I am one of them, that my mind operated like your mind operates today, and I share a brief moment about my story, it helps me establish immediately therapeutic alliance, a therapeutic rapport, instant credibility. And now they feel comfortable sharing their stories. And now we can really dive deep into the trauma. What contributed to your addiction? I don't want to just work on relapse prevention skills. I mean, I can do that all day with you in my sleep. I want to understand what at your core contributed to your dependency on gambling or substances. As a therapist, I try my best, but I also acknowledge that I might not be a good fit for every client that walks into the treatment center. I'm not going to be. My style might not resonate with a client, and that's okay too. I can't take that personally. But what I can do is I can try to help everyone, but that's humanly impossible. But I certainly try. I just hope that I can continue to be a good role model for my clients and for others around the world by coming on places like your YouTube channel.
You said earlier, Jonathan, you're a type A control freak. How hard is it? This is a question personally from me. I always say you can't help someone who doesn't want the help, or if you want it more than they want it, it's not going to work. How do you deal with that? How do you get past that frustration?
I try and let them know that the truth, that I don't see your commitment, that I do. And I pose the same question you just posed, like, do you really want this? And if the answer is no, like you said, I just say to them, I'm still willing to help you. I hope before your treatment ends that you've changed that narrative and you could see all the benefits that sobriety affords you. And maybe I can change that mindset from session 1, 2, 3 to the 12th, 15th session where you can finally say, I do want it now. And I'm going to do what I can to try and help everyone that I can. But like you said, there are going to be people who are not going to change their mindset. And I choose to live in acceptance, and I can look myself in the mirror and say, I tried my best.
People want to get in touch with you. They want to find out more about your addiction counseling, or they want to read up on any information about you. Where can they find you?
Thank you for asking. Two places. One, I have a professional Instagram. It's called The Real, Jonathan Schwartz. And the other would be to go to our website at Altus Rehab, ALTUS rehab.com, and reach out and we'll help you if you want help.
Anyone wanting to check them out when we're finished here, please get down below in the description, check them links out, do a bit of research on Jonathan. Somebody who's watching now, who's sitting on the fence, who's unsure, do I have an addiction? Am I in control of my gambling, or is gambling controlling me? What would you say to them?
I would say if you're asking yourself that question, the likelihood is that gambling is controlling you just by simply you asking that question. And I would also encourage them to go to a meeting, even if it's online, although I highly recommend in person. And most importantly, I would ask them to recognize that they're worthy, and please have the courage to be vulnerable and ask for help.
Jonathan, thank you so much for being here today, for taking the time to share your story with us, take us through the depths, the lows of your addiction, but most importantly, all the amazing work, giving hope to people out there that it is possible to change, it is possible to get over this addiction and come out the other side and become a better version of yourself. Thank you so much for sharing everything, and also thank you so much for all the work you do now in the industry and all the help that you're giving to people out there.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing with your beautiful YouTube podcast and helping others too. And thank you for having me today. I really appreciate this opportunity. And to meet you has been a joy. Thank you.
Mate, thank you so much. Incredible. The Jonathan I see sitting in front of me now is just wow. People say, I get told this sometimes, like they can't imagine me gambling. I just can't imagine you in the addiction, just the person I see now, the amount of growth. It's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's as you know, I mean, not gambling means freedom. And that I never had until this.
Guys, thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed the episode today, please think about hitting that subscribe button. There's a video on the screen now. It's the one YouTube has recommended that thinks is going to be the best suit for you. Click that video and I will see you over there.